All right, everyone. Ready to dive into a topic a bunch of you requested.
Yeah, a potential financial power shift.
Kind of wild stuff happening right now between Asia and the Middle East.
And North Africa.
Or me, as it's often called.
Yeah.
Imagine for a second.
The biggest financial players in the world.
Are just Wall Street.
Or London anymore.
Okay.
That's kind of the future this report
Is hinting at.
Yeah.
It's not just speculation.
It's just like a serious...
From HSBC.
Okay.
It's called New Networks of Capital. How growing investment links between Asia and the Middle East have the potential to reshape global capital flows.
Wow.
They brought in some heavy hitters.
So like weigh in on this, we're talking...
HSBC executives.
Okay.
Economists at S&P Global Ratings. Even a former permanent secretary.
At Singapore's Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yeah, this isn't like...
Some blog posts.
You know, these are people who like live and breathe global finance.
Absolutely.
And they're saying...
that Asia and the Middle East...
already sitting on a massive chunk...
of the world's wealth...
and are about to change how that wealth...
is invested.
Wow.
But first...
let's
set the stage.
Yeah.
We've got Asia.
This, like, economic powerhouse.
And then Mine.
Known for oil.
But looking to branch out, right?
Yes. And you know what's really interesting?
That for a long time, both these regions have typically sent their wealth, like, to the West.
To be managed and invested.
Okay.
But that old pattern...
it's starting to shift.
And the implications of that are huge.
Okay.
Just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about.
Asia Pacific.
The Middle East and Africa now hold a combined 30%.
Of global financial assets.
Okay, so break that down for me.
What's the actual number?
We're looking at...
it's a staggering...
USD 83.6 trillion.
To put that in perspective...
that's like the entire U.S. economy.
3 times over.
83.6 trillion.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that.
It's a huge number.
And here's another fascinating detail.
9.
Out of the world's 10 biggest sovereign wealth funds.
These are basically giant investment funds.
Controlled by governments are located in these regions.
Wow.
These funds represent trillions of dollars in assets.
But historically, they've often invested heavily outside their own regions.
So we got all this wealth.
But it's been flowing out.
That seems kind of counterintuitive,
Yeah.
and that's what this report is saying.
It's changing. Why is all this money starting to stay closer to home?
So to speak.
That's a great question.
It's almost like this wealth was just like sitting in offshore accounts.
Just kind of waiting for the right moment.
And now that moment has arrived.
Yeah.
So what's changed?
Why are Asia and MENA suddenly becoming...
like such hotbeds for investment?
So the report lays out...
6 key shifts driving this.
Okay.
And what I find really helpful is...
that they don't just throw jargon around.
they actually break down.
Why each shift matters in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, let's unpack.
Those shifts then,
Starting with number 1,
which the report calls,
intra-regional financial infrastructure.
right?
To be honest, it sounds a bit technical.
What does that even mean?
Think of it this way.
They're essentially building new financial highways.
Connecting Asia and MENA markets.
Okay.
It's about streamlining the flow of capital,
Between these regions,
making it easier and cheaper to invest directly.
in each other's economies,
So less reliant
on Western institutions.
acting as middlemen,
Exactly.
which historically has been the norm.
Historically, that's been the case, yeah.
Yeah.
This shift paves the way for greater financial autonomy,
And potentially better returns.
since you're cutting out those intermediary fees.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, what's shift number 2?
Shift 2 is the emergence
Of increasingly sophisticated
and attractive.
regional capital markets.
Okay.
Imagine you want to invest in a company,
You'd probably feel more confident buying stock
in a well-established, publicly traded company
versus a tiny startup.
with no track record,
Where
less risk.
more information available
Precisely.
as Asian and minnow markets mature.
They're offering a wider range of investment opportunities.
From booming tech companies to infrastructure projects.
And more.
Okay.
Plus, there's increased liquidity,
Meaning it's easier to buy and sell assets.
which attracts even more investors.
It's becoming a virtuous cycle.
Growth attracting more growth.
Exactly.
Now shift 3.
That sounds a bit technical.
It's about index weightings,
Okay.
but it has a huge impact.
On how money moves around the world.
Break it down for us.
What are index weightings?
And why should we care?
Imagine there's this global ranking of stock markets.
Based on size and performance.
Okay.
Big investors, like pension funds,
Often follow these indexes.
to decide where to put their money.
Right.
As Asian and MENA markets grow,
They get a higher ranking
and consequently, a bigger share.
of that investment pie,
So it's not just individual investors.
deciding to put their money here,
It's the big players too,
almost automatically shifting funds.
based on these indexes.
Exactly.
Now, shift number 4 is interesting.
Because it challenges?
A deeply ingrained power structure.
Okay.
It's about asset management.
Basically, who manages all those trillions of dollars?
We talked about
Right. Isn't that a job?
for like Wall Street hotshots.
Traditionally, yes.
But that's starting to change.
For a long time, most of the firms
Managing the wealth of Asia and Minai.
haven't been from those regions.
Okay.
But now we're seeing a rise in local expertise,
Which means those regions have more control over.
how their money is invested and where it's going.
It's about bringing financial decision-making,
Closer to home.
which I imagine resonates.
With a lot of people in these regions.
Absolutely.
Okay, 2 more to go.
What's shift number 5?
Shift 5 is about private markets.
These are deals happening behind the scenes,
Okay.
often involving direct investments,
In companies or projects
bypassing the traditional stock exchanges.
and financial institutions,
So more of a direct line,
between those with capital.
and those seeking it,
Exact.
potentially cutting out some of the red tape.
And gatekeepers,
It's a space ripe with opportunity.
especially for those looking to invest early.
In high-growth companies or sectors,
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of interest in areas like renewable energy
Technology
and infrastructure.
in both Asia and MENA.
So it's not just about financial returns
It's about shaping the future.
of these regions.
Investing in what they believe in.
Absolutely.
Okay, bring us home.
What's the final shift?
The 6th and perhaps most significant shift.
Is the growing use of local currencies.
Okay.
Imagine a world where you don't have to convert everything.
To U.S. dollars to trade or invest internationally?
Right, less reliance on the dollar.
As the default global currency.
Exactly.
But what does that look like in practice?
We're already seeing more trade and investment deals,
Being settled in yuan?
rupees,
Yeah.
and other local currencies.
Okay.
This reduces exposure to currency fluctuations
Lowers transaction costs.
and strengthens local economies.
Wow.
It also reduces dependence on the U.S. financial system.
Which is a big deal geopolitically.
So these shifts,
They're about way more than just money.
they're about shifting power dynamics.
On a global scale,
Absolutely.
this is already more insightful.
Than my last economics class.
And way more interesting
But I'm hungry for specifics.
Right.
What are some real-world examples?
of this Asia-MER connection.
In action. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding how Asia and MENA are building like their own
Financial infrastructure, to
Yeah.
seeing how they're becoming,
increasingly attractive.
for investors all over the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
It's one thing to talk about these big picture trends,
I think it's really helpful
to understand how things are changing.
on the ground.
Yeah, what are
Some
some
examples of this
Asia-MENA connection?
in action.
Right, so let's look at some real-world examples.
One of the most noticeable trends is the surge.
In direct investment between the two regions, you have China, for example,
Pouring money into Saudi Arabia.
supporting its massive infrastructure projects.
Right.
And India is emerging as like a hotbed for UAE investments.
Particularly in its tech and renewable energy sectors.
That's a huge shift, isn't it?
We're so used to hearing
In
about
Western companies investing.
in developing economies.
Right.
It feels like things...
We're reversing a bit.
Absolutely.
It's a sign of the times, as we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not just government-level investments either.
The private sector is jumping on board, too.
Sure.
The Saudi Arabian IPO market,
Is booming.
attracting global attention and capital.
Wow.
We're seeing companies from all over the world
Including from Asia.
seeking to list their shares.
On the Saudi Stock Exchange.
And it's not just...
About stocks, right?
What about bonds?
Are those getting in on the fun, too?
Yes, indeed.
Asian investors are increasingly looking to Middle Eastern debt.
As a source of investment,
Okay.
it's a sign of confidence in the regions.
Economic stability and long-term growth prospects.
It's like they're saying,
We believe in you, Mina.
Yeah.
So much for this being...
all talk and no action, right?
Exactly. This is happening
On the ground.
as we speak.
Yeah.
And it's not just the big players either.
Think about all the side hustles.
This boom is creating...
Side hustles.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Tell me more.
Think about all those mega projects.
In Saudi Arabia, need roads,
Housing for workers.
logistics networks.
Okay.
Those are huge opportunities
Yeah, for smaller businesses.
looking to get a piece of the pie.
I see.
Let's not forget the energy transition.
Gold rush.
Everyone wants in on renewables these days.
Right.
We're talking about Chinese solar panels popping up in Qatar.
Saudi Arabia signing deals for electric vehicle manufacturing.
Let's green gold rush.
This is all incredibly exciting.
But let's get real for a second.
You're probably listening to this thinking,
Okay, fascinating.
but how does it impact me?
That's the million-dollar question.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And luckily, the report provides some...
Practical insights.
Okay, so imagine I'm an investor.
Listening to this right now,
What's my takeaway?
well, now might be a good time to diversify
Your portfolio.
and look beyond traditional markets.
Okay.
Emerging markets are risky.
Yes, but they're also where the growth is.
Gotta spread the risk.
Explore new opportunities.
What about business owners?
Any golden nuggets for them?
In this Asia-MENA shakeup,
Absolutely. Start thinking about your supply chains.
potential partnerships,
Even new customer bases.
in this rapidly growing corridor,
Okay.
the opportunities are there.
For those who are paying attention,
And what about someone like me?
who's just intensely curious about the world,
And how it works.
this shift impacts everything.
You're talking about global politics, the future of energy.
The balance of power.
Great.
Staying informed gives you a unique perspective
On how the world is changing.
right before your very eyes
It's like having a front row seat.
to the biggest show on earth.
Exactly.
All right, so we covered a lot of ground today
From the shifting sands of global finance,
to this really fascinating
Asia-MENA connection.
that's reshaping how investments are flowing around the world.
The big story.
Big thanks to you for breaking it all down for us.
And to everyone listening,
Stay curious,
stay informed.
and we'll catch you in the next deep dive.